And when they're with large corporations, oh, here we are. We'll have to leave that till later. Oh, hello from Bucharest. It's John Florescu, and I'm joined by General Philip Breedlove, who is with us from Atlanta, Georgia. In fact, he's with us the second time because we had him on July 25th, 2022. So it's an update on a previous visit, and I want to thank you very much for coming on with us. And you know you're incredibly busy. Every time I turn on the TV, I saw you the other day, you're on 20 minutes ago. So we're particularly grateful that you found the time. By way of background, the general is from Atlanta, the home of Ted Turner, I guess, and then CNN. And he was a Phi Kappa Alpha graduate or of that distinction at Georgia Institute of Technology, which myself from MIT or nearby MIT, being nearby MIT, as well as a rival in the South, very highly regarded university. He joined the United States Air Force. He worked in so many bases. I'd use up precious time just to go through them, but also was having serious commanding positions in Spain, in Germany, and South Korea. And I guess you also are first F-16 flight commander. Is that correct?
Yes.
You didn't give any advice to Tom Cruise on Mission Impossible, did you?
He was flying a second-rate airplane.
Now, most importantly, he was also Allied Commander, Supreme Allied Commander from 2013, I think May to 2016, and he's joining us from his headquarters there. General, thank you for coming. I always am looking at the news like we all are, and I keep on hearing that the Ukrainians are losing ground in against this war against Russia. Have they lost a lot of ground, or we get so many mixed reports since, say, springtime?
Yeah, so this report is now about a month old, but it captures a snapshot, and I'll catch that up in just a second, by the way, to today.
Okay.
But about a month ago, some of the leading folks who track this made the following observation. In the past 365 days, starting about a month ago, Russia has lost 400,000 soldiers.
Wow.
And for that 400,000 soldiers, Russia gained about 0.69 of 1% of Ukraine's territory.
Amazing.
So let's put that in Georgia, America, Georgia speak. They got just a little bit of land and they lost 400,000 soldiers.
Unbelievable.
So the stories that you hear are very much what Putin wants you to hear. He wants to hear that he's winning this war. So now let's open the aperture a little bit.
Mhm.
Russia in the past year has asked 20,000 North Korean soldiers to come help him retake sovereign Russian land. They took back some of it, but they didn't take all of it. So Russia was unable on its own to retake its own sovereign land. They asked North Korea to help them. They still didn't take it. Just very recently, they've asked for another tranche of North Korean soldiers. And oh, by the way, during these times, Russia has asked and now has about 20,000 North Koreans working in the factories in Russia because Russia doesn't have the manpower to man its own factories, and it's beginning to affect their wartime front. So here's what I would ask you.
Wow.
Does that sound like a country that's winning a
Yeah.
war?
Yeah,
The
it's
answer is
amazing how,
no.
yeah, I mean, I'm always startled because you see such conflicting reports even before AI came in. And most recently, I think the Wall Street Journal the other day said that the Ukrainians were had lost their nimbleness as soldiers, tactical commanders. I don't know. What do you make of that comment?
Well, that's an interesting comment because if you really read the depth of that article, what they're saying is Ukraine for years has done innovative thinking to beat the Russians on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And they're really pretty good at it,
Mhm.
the way they're developing technology and so forth.
Mhm.
But what that article is actually uh, trying to make forward is that Ukraine is falling away from that innovative thinking and is becoming more Russian like. The Russian leadership of this war has been horrible. I
Yeah.
mean, just horrible. Look at this. They were supposed to be a world superpower military force, and we're fighting a World War I artillery-based attritional battle. It's a failure of an immense proportion, and it started by failure of their air power to
Mhm.
establish air superiority. I won't go there, but there's a long story of why an American superpower, massively bigger and more capable than Ukraine at the start of this war, has messed it up so badly that they're locked in linear attritional artillery based warfare. So, what you see though is, especially in the last 3 days, in the lead up to this summit coming up, is Russia's trying to get this story on the street that they've
Yeah.
broken through the lines in
Yeah.
Ukraine. It's propaganda of the highest degree. There are small elements, really, really, really small elements that are breaking through the line in a couple of places, but there is no massive breakthrough that Western press just wants to say Russia's winning. And in fact, many thinkers like you and I were talking about, Wes Clark and others,
Yeah.
we all see Russia as losing this war right now.
That's
They
fascinating.
don't want the world to see it because they want power at the negotiating table.
That's fascinating, particularly now. Excuse me, I'll cut this off. Do you think Trump himself and the team around him understand what you said? Or do you think the intelligence flows through, the military intelligence flows through successfully, that when he goes to sit down, he doesn't feel like he doesn't have a strong deck as he thinks that he has?
So, John, I would have said a month ago that I'm not sure that Mr. Trump, our president, is getting that kind of intelligence. But
Mm.
I believe now that he's beginning to get better intelligence because he's starting to say and do things that lead me to believe that he actually understands what is now happening on the battlefield. And this whole idea, he said the other day, probably the most refreshing breath of air that we have heard is when he started talking about beachfront real estate. You know, he talked about how Ukraine had lost so much shoreline,
Yeah.
and maybe it's important to get some of that back.
Um,
I leap to my mind is Mariupol. Remember, Mariupol
what's,
is sort of like the Mississippi River in
yeah.
America. All the
Right.
agriculture and things go out through that port,
Right.
and losing it to Russia was a big deal. So I'm hoping now that our president is beginning to realize that, and I'll stop with this. Mr. Putin never intended to be a partner in peace in Ukraine. Mr. Putin now is not a partner in peace in Ukraine. And Mr. Putin will never be a partner for peace in Ukraine. I think our president is finally beginning to see and understand that.
And the language that he used the other day, or he updated his explanation for going, is like a listening session as opposed to making any kind of deal, that this is going to listen. So it seems to me that what all the European leaders have probably been whispering in his ear for 5, 6 months, and others like yourself are experts, is sinking in.
Well, and I would also remind, you don't need to be reminded, but maybe our larger audience needs to be reminded that we in the West, to include the United States, has said many times nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so I think that the president, in saying that he's listening, he's kind of signaling that I'm not going to go over there and cut a big deal about Ukraine without having Ukraine be a part of it. And as you know, we have had the same attitude about Europe. We're not going to discuss Europe above the heads of the NATO EU
Yeah.
grouping with Putin. That's what Putin's wanted all his life, is to
Yep.
blow off Europe, excuse me, blow off Ukraine, and be seen as sitting at the table with a real world superpower and deciding the fate of Europe and Ukraine. So
I
I
remember
think, again, our president's beginning to see through some of the sham that Mr. Putin's trying to accomplish here.
And like you were saying, also a lot of the media is sort of, reinforcing these misimpressions. And I see that. And when I talk to military people, I kind of get a different point of view. Kissinger, I think, said that in his understanding of history, that sort of peace accords rarely succeed when the principal point of battle is not present at the negotiating table. So when two superpowers get together, try to work out a deal, it usually doesn't happen. Does that square with your thinking?
I don't agree with. I've known Mr. Kissinger in my past, and I think he's a really smart guy, but I don't necessarily agree. Well,
Well,
then maybe what we should do is we should have a summit with the United or with the European Union or NATO and decide the fate of Russia. I mean,
yeah,
that's kind of
yeah,
what we're talking about here, right? Is that what we're advocating, that Russia and US can decide the fate of Europe and Ukraine?
yeah.
No.
No,
And
well, that's
we
what.
and you, we and the EU or we and NATO should not be sitting down to decide the fate of
No,
Russia.
exactly right. Well, the Kissinger point was you have to have all the main parties at the table, which I
Oh,
think is.
I misunderstood
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
said.
That
I
was
no
his
no.
point.
Yeah,
Sorry,
no.
but
Now I tell you, I agree with that.
yeah,
The
I agree.
parties need to be at the table. This
Right.
party right now, I would say, Europe, Ukraine, Russia, and the United States. That's the group that has to hammer out the final agreement.
Given what you just said, that they're going to listen, that maybe, Trump is a little more up to speed on the situation, what can you expect will happen at the end of this meeting in Alaska? What's the best one can hope for?
Well, let's cover the worst first.
Okay, let's cover the
If the
worst.
president gets so fed up with Putin because he realizes that Putin is not going to be a partner for peace, and let's talk about that in a minute,
Yeah,
peace
okay.
versus ceasefire.
Okay.
But if President Trump sees that Putin is just trying to pull him over
Yeah.
and
Play with them.
take advantage of him. The good news is Mr. Trump may walk out. The bad news is that Mr. Trump may do what he has said, which is wash his hands of this war
Yeah.
and let it go. We don't want that. We want the United States involved in how this ends.
Mhm.
The best that could come out of this is that our president truly gets a read of how little Putin wants peace, and then decides to go forward with a very, very clear understanding that, as I said before, Putin never has been a partner in peace. He is not now a partner in peace, and he never will in the future be a partner in peace.
So there's no change in Putin's view of the world. Perhaps going back to Catherine the Great, that Russia he wants back, and he's not changing. To give him credit, he's been pretty clear about that. He's not going to change anything. Do you think President Trump has any red lines in the negotiation? I will not do this. I will not do that. Does he go in there with some idea of how far he's going to go, how much he's going to give in?
Well, I think he does inside his own head. I don't think that he talks much about it. He does put a few things out there to sort of salt and season the
Yeah.
conversation, but the statements that everybody's going to have to give up something and some of these things. I think he starts to season the soup before he makes it.
Yeah.
But again, I've said this more than once. I just said it on CNN a few minutes ago. If people tell you that they know what he's thinking, you need to turn your recorder off and put your pencil down, because
That's just what John
nobody
Bolton said.
knows what he's thinking except for him.
That's very true. But he also, I think he has a very good intuitive sense about of a situation when he's right on it and focused on it. So talk about the bright side. I think if he feels he's being conned, he's been played with, if he senses that Putin is trying to fiddle with his mind, I think he'll take offense. Because Dennis Ross said something to me a while back. He said, The Europeans are very worried that he'll simply concede to Putin. The fact he's gone from saying he was going to produce a peace quickly to saying it will take 6 months. He realizes that he can't just look like he's conceded to Putin because it looks like it's a loss for him. And Trump operates on the principle of looking like he won, not like he lost. How important is that fact?
Well, I think some of that is at a really guttural level, but I think the bottom line is the president does want to be seen as winning. I think he wants to be seen as a peacemaker.
Yep.
And let's go back again and talk about peace versus ceasefire in a minute.
Okay.
But I also believe that, the president's under a little pressure. If you remember the recent conversations where people were labeling him Taco Man, he
Yeah.
took great offense to that. And so I think he understands that there are people out there that are waiting for him to fail in this respect. And so I think that sadly, there are people in America that would love to see America fail just to get rid of a president. Then there
Yeah.
are a whole bunch of us that never want to see America fail.
Yeah.
And we don't want to see any American president fail because it's not good for our country. But I do believe that President Trump is under a lot of pressure. But I think the good things are he really does want to figure out a peace, and two, he sees an opportunity and he wants to do that now, so he will be seen as successful.
You were talking earlier about Korean workers going to Russia to keep the factories warm and buzzing along. How long can Putin himself play this game? He's got China sort of on his side. He's got, Korean soldiers. He's got all kinds of oil being sold around the world by India. I mean, how long can he go on until his bluff is called?
Well, I think that sort of economically and so forth, he can go a lot longer. Things are getting really ugly. If depending on who you listen to, his economy
Mm-hmm.
is getting ugly.
Mm-hmm.
And some people say that his cash reserves and other things are going to fail him, sooner than expected. Um, I'm not an economist. I don't even want to answer questions on that part. But what I do believe is that there is this, now I say, this myth out there that Russia is long suffering and the people of Russia will continue to suffer.
Yeah,
If you look back, I remind people this is an 11-year long war. This is not a 3.5 year long war.
right.
This war started in the early spring, late winter of 13, or excuse me, 14, when I was the SACEUR. And if you remember in that first invasion of Crimea and then the invasion of the Lugansk and Donetsk regions, uh, the moms of Moscow started getting up in arms when the body bags started coming
Yeah,
home.
that's right. I remember
And
that.
Russia is fighting hard now to avoid that picture. We're told, I don't have personal proof, but
Yep.
the intelligence tells us they have taken forward crematories. They're burning a lot of bodies, and they're telling the families at home that their sons have abandoned them and gone off into the world.
Yeah.
So Russia knows they have a problem and they've got to fight it. So what am I taking so long to say? Russia is a long suffering country.
Yeah.
Putin in a command wartime economy can keep this running until the wheels fall off. The
Yep.
question is, when do the wheels fall off? But the fraying around the edges of his controlling of the narrative and people starting to
Yes, Pete.
question where he's headed, that I think is a Achilles heel that he's got to deal with.
We're talking a lot about psychology and the negotiations between superpower leaders. I mean, one would have to think that Putin's thinking, this guy's 79 years old. He's in power for 3 more years. We don't know who his successor will be. We'll just sort of play this out a little bit. And the Russians are pretty good, like in hockey, of kind of hanging in there a long time, or Stalingrad. I mean, what do you think? Could that be one of the kind of saving strategies for Putin?
This has been Putin's strategy for some time now.
Yeah,
Uh, get to the brink and then offer a meeting and get another 50 days, and then get to 49 days and offer
yeah,
another meeting and get another 49 days.
yeah,
And this is already starting to bite our president a little bit. Yesterday, his opposition, not me, I don't engage in this kind of stuff, but his opposition brought up the taco thing again, because where are the sanctions that he said would happen if we didn't have an agreement by a couple of days ago when he shortened it to 10 to 12 days? So the president's a little bit on a clock, and Mr. Putin's going to try his very best to parlay that out to more delays, more delays. Just let me keep beating up on Ukraine. He I think knows he can't militarily win this war. He's counting on the West to cave
yeah.
uh, and give
And
him his objectives.
And it doesn't look like that's likely to happen from what we've seen in Europe recently. I mean, I remember speaking to somebody, well, if you live in Portugal, you're not too concerned about Russia. But if you're in the Baltics or this new Bucharest 9, that's Bucharest 11 that the Polish president articulated the other day, what do you make of the Bucharest 11? I mean, in my view, I have a feeling, leaving nuclear weapons aside, the Bucharest 11, all those countries, from including the new NATO entries, I guess, would overwhelm the Russians.
Well, let's remind me that if I get too far afield here, but we
Okay.
used to think of this in terms of the old NATO and the
Yeah.
new NATO, meaning former Warsaw Pact NATO.
Yeah.
And it's sort of fallen out along those lines. There is a great awakening now in France and Germany and a few
Yeah.
other places. You used to be a part of that old NATO group. These people are starting to see my mantra: never was a peace guy, isn't a peace guy now, and never will be a peace guy. And people have started signing up to a phrase I repeat often, which is Putin will not stop. He will have to be stopped.
Mm.
And so, folks are starting to stay about that. A closing point on this, and I want to get back to the ceasefire versus peace. Please
Okay.
ask me that question next. But the closing point on this is Putin has caused his own demise here in a startling way. Finland and Sweden are now in NATO.
Yeah.
That's Mr. Putin's doing.
Yeah.
You know how they do business in those countries, and the people changed their view because of what Putin's adventurism around the world.
Yeah.
And then the second thing was 10 years ago, the West was not ready to fight Putin.
Hmm.
Today, the West is far more capable of fighting Putin, and every day they get more and more capable, while every day Putin's army gets weaker and weaker and weaker. The
Right.
Ukrainians re-leveled that,
Hmm.
and the growth of military capabilities in the former Warsaw Pact countries and others, these have changed the situation. I do not personally believe that Russia, in a conventional sense, could take on NATO right now. I think
No
Mr.
way.
Putin
No.
understands that he'd get whipped.
Yeah. I mean, even the Poles have a significant army, and the Poles certainly have a strong motivation. And
Yeah.
even the small Baltic countries, I mean, they seem pretty aligned as well. Ceasefire, we go back to the ceasefire because I think that it's a fairly important outcome or possible outcome. Do you think it's likely?
Okay, first of all, let me just argue a different point.
Okay.
A short ceasefire as a result of these talks would be a good thing. Emphasis on short, because what we need to get to is a durable peace. Mr. Putin desperately wants this to be locked in a ceasefire. Why? Because the most important thing is to get the fighting stopped, get the killing stopped, and then begin to turn Ukraine into a Western economic power. And they have absolute potential to be and do that. The
Yeah.
real win here in the long term is that Ukraine turns into a nation that is fully involved with the West and has a growing, thriving
Yeah.
economy, and Russia is still Russia.
What it is. Yeah.
That is a big win for Ukraine in the end game. So Putin needs this to be a extended ceasefire, because foreign investment is not going to go into Ukraine if they believe that Ukraine could erupt into war
Yeah.
again
Yeah.
and they lose their investment. So Putin is going to hang on to ceasefire as much as he can. And what we in the West really need to be doing is working towards a durable peace with a real deterrent to ensure the peace in Ukraine. That changes the dynamic into the future.
Right. And how likely, I mean, we're all guessing here, but how likely do you think that is to happen? How long is the meeting going on for? Do you know these negotiations? It's Friday
Well, I
and
mean, the president and Rubio have both said that in 5 minutes they're going to know whether he's there to really do business or if this is just trying to buy more time.
right.
So it could be a very, very short meeting. And I would hope that our president would do that if it was very, very clear that Mr. Putin shows up and he's trying to dictate all the terms. The president should say, "Thank you for your interest in world security," and walk out. I hope that happens. But if
You,
Mr. Putin is really sincere, or if he can fool them into believing that he's sincere, then this meeting could go quite some time. I think the president's airplane scheduled to only be up there a day, but
mm.
who knows how long it could go.
Yeah. You seem in a way optimistic that Trump has his eyes keenly on Putin's lips and you said he'd make a deal or he'll fool him. Well, he'll try to, but we know Putin won't change. That's what you're saying. Putin is not going to all of a sudden completely change his stripes. The tiger will not change his stripes. So the question then, that means that he'll try to trick Trump. Well, Trump's not that easy at close range, I think, to be bowled over. I don't think Trump has any.
I agree with you, and I hope that to be the case. If his eyes are wide open about the motivations of Mr. Putin, I think that President will do good. But as you've seen, the emissaries we've sent to Russia
Yeah,
have not fared so well in those conversations. I mean,
yeah,
coming out of a meeting saying he seemed like a pretty nice guy.
yeah,
Oh my goodness.
yeah,
How can any intelligent individual
yeah,
actually
naive.
believe that?
Right. And I guess he even sent him a gift, right? A painting from Moscow, hand delivered back to Washington. So taking what you're saying, let's be optimistic for a second, that Putin says, I don't buy this. I mean, Trump says, I don't buy this. He's conning me. He's just, let's just turn back. Where does that leave the situation? What would we want
Well,
after
then
that?
we have two decisions, and we kind of talked about that before.
Yeah,
I mean, the bad decision would be that our president says, "I'm done with this. You guys have your war,"
yeah,
and he and the vice president's been pretty vocal about just completely pulling America out of this,
yeah,
which I think would be a horrible, short-sighted mistake.
yeah,
On the other hand, our president could go, and I know he's not from the Bronx, he's from a different part of the
yeah,
New York, but let's just use the Bronx because it makes a good example. The president could go Bronx on him, you know?
yeah,
He
yeah,
could say, "I'm fed up with you.
yeah,
You've been pulling the wool over the world's eyes long enough, and we're not going to buy your delaying anymore." We said 50 and then we said 12, and now both of those are gone.
right.
And so I think it's time for him to say, "We're going to do what we said we were going to do." I would start immediately by spending all the money that is being held of Russian money around the world. Spend it to enable Ukraine to recover and prepare to really take the fight to the Russians. I would then also, uh, if I was leading the U.S. military, I would put us back in charge of the force generation business and begin to get busy about giving Ukraine what they need to fight. And if you call Putin's bluff and then you take concrete actions to put on the more crippling sanctions, Oh, by the way, end the business of the ghost fleet. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
And if you do these tough measures, Mr. Putin will understand that that the West means business and the United States president means business.
And let's say, taking what you said there, that one option is that Trump says, "I've had it," and that it's not my war, it's Europe's war.
He's threatened that, hasn't he? So I'm just
Yeah.
repeating something he said.
And if it becomes Europe's war that's now realized, you have to give credit to Trump in this sense that he asked for 2%. Now he's asked for 5%. He's got 5%. And now the Germans are talking about building back up. There's a sort of new coalition between Macron and the Germans. Can they pick up the ball on this, or is it just so complicated in terms of how you fight a war, different systems, different, military equipment and so forth? Is it plausible that they could do that?
So I'm going to answer. And you
Yep.
should know that there are Americans who think I have drank the bathwater, or as they say, I have gone native. You know, I have
Right. Right.
lived in Europe 8 times,
Right.
and I started there as a captain in 1983, and I ended up there as a four-star commanding NATO. So I have a decidedly European view
Right.
of business. You need to know that because
Yep.
what I'm about to
Sure.
say, some will laugh at. I do believe if Europe really took up the banner, Europe could do it by themselves. I think it would be a horrible geopolitical outcome that the United States disassociates itself from a war. Let me just ask you, I'm not going to actually let you answer because I
Go
just want
ahead.
to make a point.
Well, yeah.
I like to ask people, who is your best favorite author about World War One? And then I ask them, who is your best or favorite author about World War II? And then I like to make the point that whoever it is, the 4 or 5 best authors for World War One and the 4 or 5 best authors for World War II all agreed in their own words to something along the following lines: that the delayed involvement of the United States in those two wars cost the United States more in revenue, investments,
Yeah.
and U.S. soldiers' lives than if they had made a different decision earlier. And then on top of that, they also all agree that the delayed involvement of the United States in both of those wars cost European lives, cost European treasury, and affected the world economy more. So the
Hmm.
point being, if we in the United States decides, and I know they hate this word, but if we are becoming retrenching back to America only kind of thing, we are in trouble of repeating history in Europe. I think that we need to make a decision that is that reflects that old adage that if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. And we
Yeah.
don't want to repeat that. So I am an advocate that I think NATO and the EU, if they really push themselves, could make this work on their own. But it would be a monstrous mistake. More lives will be lost. The economy will be affected more, et cetera, et cetera. We in the West, and that includes a lot of people in the Far East,
Yeah.
we have a
Mhm.
lot of very close partners in Australia, New Zealand, all North,
Yeah.
South Korea, all around the world.
Yeah.
The Western world does not want a conflagration based on the fact that Russia now 4 times since 2008 continues to demonstrate that it will mass its army, march across an internationally recognized border, and invade and try to subjugate its neighbors.
So you got to believe that the Biden administration only fed the war effort to get a stalemate, that no one would, what wasn't
They
there
were
to.
completely deterred. If you
Mhm.
go back and read and listen to what Jake talked about,
Yeah.
and he was the one calling the shots. If you look at what Jake talked about, how he wrote, how he spoke, we,
Mhm.
the United States, were almost completely deterred. If you watch what Russia did for the last number of years, starting before, but certainly in 2013 and 2014, as this all started, Russia started in a regular way talking at the very highest levels,
Yeah.
just below Lavrov and up, somebody about every 7 to 10 days, we're talking about nukes, new nuclear weapons. We're getting out of this nuclear agreement. We're deploying nuclear weapons. We're moving up our nuclear exercise. They just over and over and over in what we call reflexive control began to talk about nukes, the threat of nukes, and World War II. And the West was then, and to some degree now, is still nearly fully deterred because of this reflexive control of the Russians.
Here we are in the summertime, and the Nobel Committee is getting together, and Trump's name has been thrown out there by a few smaller countries around the world. And you got to give Trump a little credit in the sense that when he wants to be the peacemaker, it feels genuine, it feels real, even if it's at the cost of American involvement as a policeman, if you will, around the world. Do you think that the Nobel Peace Prize somehow in the side of his head, and I'm asking you to do something that you said no one can do, read what's inside his head, but you think that, that any president's entitled to have a huge ego, that may play a little role, that if he can somehow still the waters and take down take it to a sort of peace, that works a little bit the side of his head.
Well, first, let me attack a couple of things you said.
Okay.
You said that America now is only looking to be a policeman around the world.
Or
I'm not.
was. No, I don't believe that now. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't either, and I don't think it's about Europe that I want to make the example. I think
Yeah.
that while we are telling Europe that Ukraine is your problem, we are not telling the Pacific that China is your problem.
Yeah.
We have a very
Yeah.
different approach um,
Taiwan.
to the Far East than
Yeah.
we do to Europe. And
Yeah.
so I think that even President Trump's administration would intend for America to use force if they had to in the Pacific. We see Europe very different than we see the Pacific. And so I don't think it's quite the way you described it in your lead up to the question.
Mm-hmm.
Unless I misunderstood you, I'm sorry.
No, that's not all. You're correct.
But I do believe that I'm not going to even entertain the thought of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Right.
I don't
Okay.
want to even go there, but I will say this. I do believe that this president wants to be seen as the president that has brought
Yeah.
peace. And
Mhm.
that's one of the reasons why I made the point earlier about the difference between a ceasefire, which is
Yeah.
not,
Mhm.
let me say it one more time, which is not peace, and peace, which is
Yeah.
an entirely different matter. Peace will enable Ukraine to recover. Ceasefire will not allow Ukraine to recover.
Right. You've been in Europe, you've lived in Europe all these years, so you understand it very well. And obviously you understand 20th century history. And people see now Germany sort of saying, listen, we sort of can't count on the United States, so we're going to get into this ourselves. We'll see where they are, right? Who's leading the new Europe in the West, would you say? Is there a political, who's setting the agenda? Is it France? Is it Germany? Is it England? How do you see that?
Okay, well, you didn't name any of them that I would like to talk about.
Okay.
Um,
You can name.
so first and foremost, I still have so many extremely close German friends. And there
Right.
were generations of Germans that said, we can't refit and refurb because the world doesn't want to see Germany refit and refurb.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was in Germany as Captain Breedlove alongside the Bundeswehr, the
Uh,
powerful Bundeswehr that was ready to fight the Warsaw Pact.
right.
And it was a thing of beauty, that military. I
Amazing.
believe that's what we need back
Mhm.
again. But the point being that I shouldn't use names, but I want to honor an amazingly intelligent and dedicated human being, my chief of staff, four-star German General Werner Freers. And he, over a beer, basically told me, you know, we in Germany need to get over this because not our generation. We are a different country. And he very much wanted to be a bigger part of NATO. I could not be happier if the Bundeswehr and the Luftwaffe refit, refurb, and become again a dominant military capability. But so who kickstarted all of this? In my mind, it's Poland.
Yeah.
Poland has now been on a course for some time of getting ready to fight Russia. They
Yeah.
have understood 4 times since 2008, including 2008, that Russia has crossed international borders and invaded their neighbors and attempted to subjugate them. And so Poland is the nation that kickstarted everybody else. And you know that even though we're all allies, there's always still this,
Yeah,
whoa,
of
what this
course.
guy's doing. Holy
Yeah.
crap. Oh, yeah. So, and I would just, I got to give a little shout out to the Polish who quit talking and started acting. And
Right.
I think that now we see leaders like Macron and the new German leadership that are really, I think, understanding. I'm going to just do it one more time. Russia never has been interested in peace. They are now not interested in peace, and they never will in the future be interested in peace. And I think that the leadership of Europe is beginning to understand that and realize that they have to be ready. And now they do this under the shadow of an America that has sort of flirted with pulling out. And we all know this leadership will change and
Yep.
attitudes will change. But the fact of the matter is, Europe, I think, has understood now that they need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. Again, thank you, Mr. Putin, for that. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think in the end, this is all going to be a very good thing.
Raluca, I'll just turn to Raluca and see, do you have any questions queued up that you want to cut here in the middle? Come in the middle?
Yes, we do. From Lucian Bolanuța, he's asking, could the sustained U.S. military presence in Romania and Poland become a bargaining chip in a potential peace deal between Washington, Moscow, and Kiev? And what would that mean for regional security?
So I appreciate the question. And I've actually been asked this question in some form many times. What I would say is, it being a part of a peace deal worries me far less than just the current attitude of we've got to shift our military capabilities to the Pacific. We've been saying for some time in America that we're shifting our capabilities to the Pacific. And in fact, it has not affected Russia at all. During the first President Trump term, our presence in Europe grew. Our investment in U.S. military facilities in Europe grew, and our involvement in huge exercises like Trident Juncture and others grew. So, for all of the talk about, us pulling out of Europe, we have grown. But now we are truly in a position.
Can we hear, excuse me, General, can we hear him, Raluca?
Physically moving some
Okay.
stuff out of Europe to better enable our efforts in the Pacific. So, to the speaker, that concerns me more than any bargaining chip as a part of the peace process.
Let me ask you a question. Generals and politicians often conflict with each other historically, unless they're the same person, like, I don't know, Napoleon or Eisenhower. But which president, let's say, since the Second World War, best understood the needs of the military in the sense, let the military do their job, let them make the recommendations, let them present them to the White House unfiltered? Can you think of an administration, you know many of them, that seem to understand that lesson?
Well, a lot of administrations have claimed that they have fixed the military or rebuilt the military.
Yeah.
And it's really not my job to grade the paper of presidents of our country. But
Yeah.
I think if you look at the facts, the one that actually grew our military was Ronnie Reagan.
Yeah.
And we lived off the fat of the Reagan increase for decades when we were doing the peace dividend because we believed that Russia was a partner. You know, I call it the years where we were trying to hug the bear. And the bear has proven to us they don't want to be hugged. I'm not going to repeat my little mantra. They don't have any interest in being a partner in peace. And so
Right.
we're now having to recover from relaxing. We took an acquisition holiday for several decades and lived off the fat of the Ronnie Reagan buildup. And I think that the only guy that I can remember who has truly built up our military was Reagan.
Right. NATO itself as an organization, presumably will have more to spend if they're going to allocate 5%. Well, you have to give credit actually to President Trump for not only getting it from 2% to 5%, but also trying to get the Europeans to buy American weapons. Is that the idea? How plausible is that to happen, that the Europeans would turn their back on all their own suppliers because they have to buy from Northrop or McDonnell Douglas or whoever?
Well, so first of all, John, I wouldn't throw any water on what was accomplished.
Yeah,
I agree with
yeah,
you. Our
yeah,
president made a big impact in this last summit,
yeah.
but it is 3.5 and 1.5.
Right.
The 3.5 is more what I would call Article 3. And if we need to explain that, I can. Article 3 kind of investments. The 1.5 have to be associated with
Hmm.
military things. I know one country that literally told me we're going to build a ring road around our capital because it would increase military utility. And they're going to count that investment in that ring road against the 1.5.
I
The
see.
accounting of that 1.5 is a little bit fluid. I want to celebrate that we're doing this, but we need to be straightforward with the facts. The 3.5 is a huge increase, and it is straight up about defense and Article 3. The
Mhm.
1.5 is a little more amorphous. So
Tell me when you talk to European military people, I guess their attitude is, well, we're just going to, let the president be the president, do his thing, and we'll just get on with our job. Is that the attitude, or is there a feeling like, we're being left up to our own devices, or we just don't know? What's the sort of prevailing point of view
well,
there?
well, I tried to explain a few minutes ago. Everybody said, I don't do politics, so I'm going to
Yeah,
be really
yeah,
easy how I treat this.
yeah,
But a lot of people said, this is, oh no, doom is coming.
yeah,
And I remind them what I just said a few minutes ago.
yeah,
Under Trump 1, our troop presence in Europe grew, our investment in infrastructure in Europe grew, and our investment in large force employment exercises in Europe grew. And so, for all of the words the people in America use, for all the mean tweets and all that stuff, President Trump did a good job. Uh, his the way he handled things was a little rough, but he did a okay job, a good job during his first term vis-a-vis NATO. And so we start off Trump 2 with some roughness, but we've had some successes that I think that are important. And I'm not advocating for him. I don't do
yeah,
politics, but he's the only president that I know of since NATO was formed that got NATO to increase its spending. The
yeah,
only one,
mhm,
period.
yeah,
And so I think that we just need to as the Spanish, I love it, having lived in Spain. I loved it when they would say, tranquilo, tranquilo, tranquilo. In other words, let's just take it easy and start working our way through this. And let's remember that the United States of America is a member of NATO, and we need to work team dynamics going forward.
General, I think we're going to end it there because you landed on a positive note and a very tranquilizing note there from the citing the Spanish. And I found it fascinating. I found it very, very interesting. We'll see what you'll be hounded, I'm sure, on Saturday night and Sunday morning. But let's just take the most optimistic thing that the man gets a little bit impatient and he doesn't like to be played with, doesn't have a lot of patience, and he's messed up his weekend. So we'll see what happens. And I thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully you'll have a little breather before you run to your next obligation.
This will be my third hour of talking, so I'm going to try to
Get your voice back
in my throat and get prepared for 10 minutes from now for my next engagement.